Hi, everybody. Good to see you all. Hi, Katie. How are you? Great to see you. Thanks. Gilly. Hi, Mosh. How you doing? Let's see. Everybody's muted. Can everybody hear me? Can you hear me? Yeah? Okay. Okay, great. Katie, how are things? Things opening up over there, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's the shuk is 70% back. A lot of places closed. They
A
might
lot of
remain
places
closed.
closed.
Yeah, the restaurants, there's no restaurants. There's a little takeaway. They check everybody going in, fever. It's a different vibe completely. I don't know. We'll see.
But it's open, and they're limiting the people to come in.
Yeah, there's policemen all over the place. There's guards. They check your temperature. They barricaded all the entrances except two, and those two have those temperature guns. They make sure there's not a lot of people, all over the place. They spread them out. They make sure you have your mask either, under your chin or near you. If not, they'll give you a fine. My niece was delivering packages for old people, and her scarf fell, and the police stopped her, asked for her to dazahud, like they're serious about it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, at least there's a method. There's a program. There's a process. Over here, it's healthcare.
Right.
There's no. They don't have any real sense of what to do, and
Yeah.
It's nice to hear that there's a system of whatever. At least there's a system. We hope to get back there soon. We're anxious to be there.
Yeah, really. I can't imagine.
Yeah. We're really anxious to be there.
A long stretch. All right, inshallah.
Okay, it's great to have you at the class. Thank you. All right, guys, we're just about ready. Everybody can hear me? Yeah? Okay.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yep. Okay, sweetheart. Thank you. All right, we'll wait another minute.
Dad, I'm going to put the YouTube link in your chat. So just tell everyone to check the YouTube link in the chat.
Okay, whatever that means, honey. You got it. Whatever that means. I'm in, Gailey.
Good, Rick. Start with a joke.
Yeah.
Grandma Rob, loosen us up a little bit.
What's that?
Loosen us up a little bit.
Loosen us up. I said he started with a joke. With a smile. When are you coming to town, you guys?
We hope soon. Hi, Audrey. How are you?
Okay. I'll check
I
out.
hope soon.
Okay, I just added the YouTube link to the chat. Whoever wants to check out past classes, click that link.
Thank you, Dom. Perfect. Okay. All right. We'll give it one more minute and we're good. We are recording, which is good. Okay, great. Okay. Alrighty. So wanted to just give us an overall frame of reference to everything we've been doing so far and connect the dots. We started with a very specific vision and direction, and that was to create a whole life methodology and a whole life approach. So as opposed to a class here, a class there, a class there, we started out by saying we're going to start a process where we'll connect several things that stand each one on its own, but when connected, offer a holistic view of how to approach things, not only as a aftermath of this time period, but in general. We started with the concept of time and the perspective of how HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the level of mastery of time that HaKadosh Baruch Hu granted us. And that serves as the starting point. That's the axiom, that's the foundation. The second class, we spoke about beauty. and how HaKadosh Baruch Hu deliberately, overtly puts beauty in the world, puts it front and center, and encourages us and pushes us and demands of us to recognize beauty, to celebrate it, and to make it a prominent part of it in our lives. We're not ascetic. We don't run away to engage God. It's the exact opposite. We then discuss the concept of love as it results to the possibility of creating a love relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We said that our opportunity is not to do mitzvot or to learn Torah. It's to set a perspective of embracing God intimately, overtly, on an ongoing basis, where we feel that kick, that lift that you feel when you're in love with something, that recast reality that being in love allows. And we spoke about how to get that done, how that's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu pines for, and that again is an outstanding tool to enable a person to be happy and successful. We then touched on back to basics, where we highlighted a couple of elements on how a person ends a day and starts a day in order to have the frame of mind to be able to do classes 1, 2, and 3, and what will follow. We then spoke about the you and me, or the micro seder, where we used the context of the limitations of what we were able to do at that point to frame a world view, a life view of deep felt and serious appreciation that's not silly, that's not fleeting, that becomes how we live, how we ingest, how we approach people, how we approach events, and therefore puts us in a different place as people. Dial it up and step it down was about some of the Ben Adam Na'atzmo, some of the things that I want to have in me, the way I carry myself, I engage others. We brought a few examples of some outstanding people, outstanding in many respects, who carried themselves with great strength and great force, where humility didn't conflict with pride. It was its partner, where pride and strength and confidence were the enabler of the humility, where humility didn't mean weak, it meant curious and open and confident to grow. To be happy and prayer. The happiness class spoke about how happiness is not simply meant to be the result, the end game of what we pursue in life, but is the enabler and is the mover to what we do. And for that reason, HaKadosh Baruch Hu has made happiness integral to what we do and how we do it, to a point where certain mitzvot, very high profile ones, may or may not be fulfilled if they weren't done with a certain state of mind. And it's fascinating that in a legal and moral and ethical construct, which is Torah, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu would mandate how a person should feel and how a person should carry himself. And finally, up until last week with prayer, we talked about how prayer can be something sweet, but somewhat benign, or prayer can be a motivating, empowering tool that shouts to self-direction, introspection, and clarity, highlighted by the fact that we and HaKadosh Baruch Hu are partners in this process. And to the extent that we can empower our prayers, even minimally, with a greater level of understanding, with saying them more slowly, hearing what we're saying, understanding what we're saying, and then letting the words reflect into us, touch us, then we're in a different place and we can achieve infinitely more. Today, and as I mentioned, each class stands on its own with God's help. Each class stands on its own. And when put together, we start to form what I believe is just a wonderful and, God willing, enriching approach to life that will enable us to grow in Torah mitzvot, become more loving, and establish an ongoing ability to grow. And that ability to grow is in each facet of life: spiritual, intellectual, emotional, and the last of which is the practical or career area. Good. So those classes are all available on what's currently Richard Cohen YouTube, hoping to be Ricky Cohen at some point, but they're all available, and please make use of them and share them. Let's all continue to grow together. I want to give a quick shout out to my son-in-law Richie, who put on a handful of concerts this week. God bless him, in the cold outdoors for two very important organizations in our community, completely disconnected, and then gave a third concert for his beautiful Abby and his classmates. And if people want to lift during these times, it's rj2.com, Rich? Huh?
RJ2music.com.
rj2music.com. Don't miss it. And for another good shot in the arm, Gailey's been putting stuff up on Instagram. And I will tell you, although I'm prejudiced and biased, they're funnier the second and third and fourth time around. Okay.
Thanks,
That
Dad.
was just, welcome, doll. That was just our quick ramp up. Today we wanted to focus on the concept of questions, and where a question stands in that Jewish worldview and in our hierarchy of how we live our lives. And I want to start with a quote by someone who most of you know probably better than I, because I know nothing about sports, but I very much enjoyed his wit and his wisdom. Yogi Berra, who I understand was an 18-time All-Star and very successful coach for the New York Yankees, was also very funny, and his wisdom and his humor was full of a lot of wisdom. And what he said, one of the quotes that he's famous for, and that I believe should frame our approach to questions, is, when you get to a fork in the road, take it. When you get to a fork in the road, take it. What does that mean? We'll figure it out together. In order to understand the concept of questions from our perspective, I wanted to do just a quick survey of a fairly broad area of things in Judaism, and let us from each one grab a little piece, an additional piece of the importance of a question. The first is the most obvious, one we're all very familiar with, which is when we begin to re-engage the notion of Herut, the notion of being enslaved to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to God, in order to become fully us. How do we start that reaffirmation and reminder? How do we get back there? We started with the Manishtana, which famously, and you're all very much aware of this, famously is 4 unanswered questions. And as we know, those questions are obligatory, whether there's anyone to listen to them or not. So let's start as our header, the importance of questions as an additional step in the process of building the lives that we're attempting to build based on the ideas we've discussed. And the entry point to understanding the value of a question is the Manishtana. Good. We go one step further, and our rabbis, we have this interesting back and forth between God and Adam HaRishon, and Adam, When Adam stumbles in the Gan Eden, and you're all familiar with this as well, HaKadosh Baruch Hu reaches out and says, Ayeka, Ayeka, where are you? And our rabbis, for obvious reasons, come back and say, where are you? What's the question? HaKadosh Baruch Hu knew where he was, knew why he was there, and what's the point of the question? Our rabbis answer that the Ayeka was an open-ended question to engage Adam Harishon, Adam, in a conversation. Wait a second. Ayeka, where are you? Might be translated, who are you right now? What's your direction? Was the tool that HaKadosh Baruch Hu used to confront Adam Harishon and begin a conversation with him, to open up with him on where he was. He could have simply said, what did you do? Or he could have said, here's the punishment for what you did. But our rabbis say the Ayeka is absolutely as open-ended as it gets. And they build on it by saying that the same type of question is what HaKadosh Baruch Hu used with Cain after he sinned against his brother, where he says, Ayeh Hevel Achicha, where is Hevel? God didn't know where Hevel was? Obviously he knew where Hevel was. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted to begin to instill in us the essentialness, the power, the directive of a question in order to build something. And in fact, our rabbis say that with Bil'am HaRasha, here again, HaKadosh Baruch Hu used the same process when he said, Mi ha'anashim ha'ele imach. Who were these people with you? And God didn't know the people? There was no other way to confront Bil'am in terms of his actions? Our rabbis say, no. There was a purpose here to start this and open this perspective of a question and what it means in Judaism. Good. Interestingly, in terms of the question that HaKadosh Baruch Hu asks of Adam Harishon, he uses two of God's names are used in the run-up to that question, Amonai and Elokim. Chesed, Midat Chesed, kindness and forgiveness, and Midat Hadin, the Midah of accountability. So the question wasn't silly. It wasn't meant to be frivolous. It was accompanied by focus through caring and a sense of accounting and demand, but it was open-ended and meant to engage. We go further, and our rabbis ask, why wasn't the Torah given in Egypt? Let's make things simpler. Let's give the Jews a different level of sovereignty, like we have here in America, or we've had in other countries throughout history, and allow the Torah to be given in Egypt, and call it a day. Greatest country in the world at that point, infinite resources, relatively speaking. If you want to bring Torah into the world, do it there. The answer is obvious. You can't ask enough questions and deal with enough real challenges so that Torah becomes alive and real and vibrant and dynamic if you're not in your own home. Many of the things will never be dealt with. Like, how does a Jewish doctor deal with a Jewish patient in a Jewish hospital on Shabbat? If the patient is sicker lo alenu and less sick, how does a Jewish doctor in a Jewish hospital deal with a non-Jewish patient? What about the electric company? What about the armed forces? And over and over and over, huge elements of Torah could not become real if we are not at home, if we're not in a place of absolute or almost absolute sovereignty. So here again, fundamentally, if we can't be challenged by questions, existential questions about how to live every day, we can't have Torah. And that's why the Torah that we have outside of Israel is not as extensive. Can't be, because we can't exercise everything. We can't be challenged and we can't question. As we go further, in just understanding the centrality of questions as they're expressed in every facet of Judaism, and then taking the messages home to us, Rambam in Hilchot Deot, that which is a precursor to his book of mitzvot, articulating the mitzvot, which sets the axioms, the paradigms based on which we live, brings a very interesting mitzvah. And it seems to be completely random, but of course it isn't. What Harambam brings in Hilchot Deot is Hocheach tochiach et amitecha. A person must call his friend to accountability should that friend be doing something that doesn't seem right. Wait a second. You want to bring that in a section that speaks to how to be a quality person, how to help ensure a just society in the laws of Ben Adam Havero, makes sense. But to bring them in the foundational point of your work, to do what? To establish what? No, it's a shocker. It's phenomenal. It shouts to us that questioning another person's behavior keeps the world alive. And in fact, if we don't question and challenge another person's behavior, the consequences are catastrophically negative. Wait a second. I have to go so far as to question what another person does? Yes. Do I judge the person? No. Must I question the person? Yes. Must I rebuke the person? Yes. Is that a mitzvah? According to Rambam, sure it is. But it's more than that. It's a fundamental of Judaism. And it's all question driven. As we go further, let's jump a little bit to the less obvious world, which is a little out there, but we'll touch on it just for a couple of minutes today. And that is that there are many different opinions on what the world will look like post-Mashiach. In other words, the humanity is moving in a certain direction. Once that direction hits a certain point, we will have this gigantic upheaval in the world that is highlighted, is brought about. From that point, there will be a time of Mashiach, and then there'll be a period of Acharit Hayamim, the period post-Mashiach. Again, this is very, very open-ended. No one has an ironclad understanding of this, but there are some interesting points in this as they relate to questions. One is that some of our rabbis say that a person will live 500 to 600 years in the time of Acharit Hayamim in order to get it all done, in order to absolutely complete his or her possibility on the planet. Not so easy to understand, but a teasing and fascinating idea, which highlights the following. With God's help, should we all live to be 120? Should we all live to be 120? That, by design, will not allow us to complete everything that we should. It means that there will be questions, an open-endedness in our lives by design. So if the ultimate life is 2 or 3 or 4 times the so-called allocation in the life structure we're living, It means by design, the life structure we're living should be ended without all the questions answered. Highlighting that a question-driven existence is exactly what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants. One other point in terms of that type of approach, and then we'll begin to pull the pieces together. When our rabbis speak about the Geulat Ha'adam and the Geulah of the Am, meaning the redemption of the individual and the redemption of the entire Jewish people, they highlight a process. The process goes like this. Step one is Emunah Shemebusas al Nisim, an entry level of loyalty to God that's triggered by, that's built on an overwhelming awareness of miracles. The second step is taking that infant level emunah, that raw and elementary level of loyalty to God, and putting it to work with nisyonot, testing it, trying it, applying it to different areas of life. Once that is done, that entry level of loyalty to God, of emunah, becomes tried, starts to get permanently imprinted into our lives. And then we have what our rabbis describe as Hotza'at HaNeshama Le'orah, meaning the neshama begins to express itself, begins to trump the physical part of a person's existence and become its leader. And finally, the beginning emunah, enabled, challenged by nisyonot, by tests and trials, which has now allowed that eternal part of us to emerge, allows us to touch and hopefully grab and make Kedusha our reality. A separateness that doesn't mean we disengage from the world, but it means we engage the world with God circling us with love and involvement, and us feeling that and us living that. Now, if you take a step back and you look at this process, it becomes crystal clear that if a person doesn't have the courage to question and is simply searching for answers, he will never get through this process. If my first awe or awareness of God, which we saw with the shock and awe system in Egypt and afterwards, isn't followed by questioning what happened, what does God want, where is this going, how do I understand this, what does it mean to my friend, how do we work with this, what's the next step? If questions weren't a part of it, it would have been a stillborn. It would have died at its inception. But the methodology is that a person has nisyonot afterwards, trials and experiences that have to be met with a question of why and how and where does this go. Fascinatingly, our rabbis say that the ultimate Geulah of the individual and all of Klal Yisrael, all of the Jewish people, can't happen without the ultimate questioner. Who's the ultimate questioner? The Ger, the convert. What? What are you talking about? The Jewish people are fabulous. Everybody's growing. They've reached a fabulous level of connectedness to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, of commitment to Torah mitzvot. And here we are. We can't pull that final trigger of the absolute redemption without who? The ultimate questioner, the Ger, the convert. What brings a Ger, a convert, to Judaism? His courage or her ability to question reality, to question all that was given to them, to challenge the paradigms that they own, that have been strongly infused in them, and to move beyond them. We need the ultimate questioner to put our Geulah over the top. It's a fascinating, fascinating perspective. And finally, as we look at, well, not so finally, but almost finally, as we look at Na'aseh V'Nishma, what is Na'aseh V'Nishma essentially? Na'aseh V'Nishma is this completely illogical, not completely, seemingly illogical perspective of the Jewish people vis-a-vis HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What does it mean? The Jewish people, when first confronted with God's Shita, with his overarching approach, said, we will do and we will understand. We will do and we will understand. What does that mean? It means that action begets understanding and not the opposite. It means that action gives birth to questions. Now, if we went the other way, Nishma V'Na'aseh, it would have set a completely different paradigm about life and about the evolution of a person. If we said Nishma V'Na'aseh, it would have said, we're going to ask all the questions, we're going to get closure, get the answers. Based on that closure, based on that answers, we're going to begin to keep Judaism. By the way, that's what we typically do in our everyday lives. We ask a question to get an answer. We want closure. That's not the idea. That's not the point. The point is the exact opposite. Na'aseh V'Nishma means that I'm going to act, and my actions are going to bring questions, and those questions are going to bring more actions, and those actions are going to bring more questions. It's a commitment to open-endedness forever. What a great perspective. Now remember, the approach that many of us have is very often the opposite. We want closure. We want answers. We want to end the chapter. We want to finish the book. That is antithetical to Judaism. Judaism is the exact opposite. We want emergence and reemergence. In fact, what we want is a seemingly conflicting reality where with Sameach B'Chelkenu, we love and cherish all that we have and appreciate it deeply. And at the same time, we're reaching to grow and reaching for more. If a person is Sameach B'Chelko, happy with who he is, simply, and pauses there, there's no life. It ended. If a person is not happy with where he is, there's not much of a life either, because you don't value all that is. So what do our rabbis advocate? That be Sameach B'Chelkecha, fully appreciate and immerse and be confident and self-identify with all that you have, and at the same time strive for more. And what's the enabler of striving? Asking questions. Want to just bring it all to the greater global present. We live in a fascinating time. I believe many would say the greatest time in humankind, and possibly the greatest time ever for the Jewish people. We live at a time where process has been transformed, where you used to have to go to a library and spend the day and go through Rolodexes and attempt to find questions. That was a valued process, but it's infinitely better today. I could go to Google, I could ask a question, and I could get an immediate answer, which enables me to ask more questions, get more answers, and moved the process infinitely forward, more forward than could ever have been done before. So it's not that process disappeared. It's that process was turbocharged. In the world today, 2 trillion questions are asked a year online. That's 2 billion are asked a year online. What does that mean? It means 2 trillion answers were given. What does that mean? That trillions of more questions will come from that. Is that not Na'aseh V'Nishma? To me, it's Na'aseh V'Nishma on steroids. It's the greatest time in human history. Does it bring with it challenges and negatives? Unquestionably. But the fact that I could pick up my phone and ask a question that may have been written about by someone on the other end of the planet, anytime I want, hundreds of times a day, billions of times a year, what could be greater than that? What could be a greater aspacleria than that? A reclaiming of what we understand Abraham Avinu to enjoy and Adam HaRishon to enjoy, and being able to see all that the world offered in one shot. So, thinking has become active. Thinking is now an active engagement. We don't think and then do. We think and immediately get something moving. So, where does this take us all? It comes to the following. When you reach a fork in the road, take it. What does that mean? When I'm confronted with 2 options, take it. What do you mean? How can you take 2 options? You can take 2 options by questioning. Where am I? What do I want? Where am I going? How do I keep building? How do I keep building? The questions become the ultimate enablers, the kickstarters. Process should be the most revered thing. So for many of us who have pined for answers and for closure, drop it. Get away from it. Forget it. Never stop developing. Never stop designing. Never stop asking. There's no greater expression of love of self or love of life or love of God than the courage to ask a question and another one and another one. There is nothing that will open more doors than that. There is no question that can't be answered. And guess what? The answers are not that important if they're not enablers of the next question, if they're not enablers of growth. In the Moreh Nevuchim, Rambam writes a very interesting thing. He writes that, it's shocking the first time you see it, he writes that he purposely put the chapters out of order. What do you mean? Shouldn't point B follow point A? And shouldn't theme B follow theme A? And Maimonides says, no. I want you to work harder. I want you to question. I want you to find. I want you to go from chapter 1 to chapter 27 and figure out how to connect them together. Our rabbis also say that a person should review what he's learned, how many times? 101. And only after 101, inshallah, we should be able to do this in our lives, review the Torah that we're learning 101 times. Only after 101 times will he own it. And if he stopped at 100, he doesn't. What are they saying? They're saying, take a text, learn it, ingest it, come back at it, question it, challenge what you understood, open new insight of understanding with your questions. We had in BMT many years ago, Nechama Leibowitz, Alei Shalom, who was a giant of the generation, a Torah scholar and a Bible scholar of the generation. There were about 100 guys in BMT at the time, and there was a small class of just a handful of guys who were given the privilege of learning with her. And she was an incredible mind, stood in the front of the room and would posit the following every day. She would open up the Chumash to whatever perek, whatever chapter and verse, and she'd say, read Rashi, read the commentator Rashi on the Chumash, and answer one thing. What is Rashi's question? What are you talking about? I understand what Rashi's saying. She says, answer me. What is Rashi's question? And she insisted that we would write what we thought his question was, each answer on a separate page of our spiral notebooks. And we'd bring them up to her desk and show them to her. And she had a red pen. And she would look at the what we had written. She'd start at the top of the page. And the overwhelming majority of the time, she'd go across the page, start at the other side, go across the page with a big red X, showing that all of us big shots who had the privilege of getting into her class couldn't, most times, articulate what Rashi's question was. And her point was, you can't understand the answer if you don't own the question. That was a great life lesson. It taught me to cherish questions. It taught me to have the courage to not be intimidated by questions. That when things are good, it's important to question. When things are not so good, it's important to question with that positive confidence in what a question brings. Questions are enablers. They kickstart a process. They're to be cherished. They're the foundation of the world we live in, and they should become the foundation of our lives. As we've said before, there was never a word in ancient Hebrew for retire. We don't retire in any respect, not from our careers, not from our intellectual growth and pursuits, not from our commitments to emotional growth and spiritual growth. We're on it until our last breath, which means that we've got to challenge and we've got to have the courage to ask questions. Finally, last point. We know that when we're saying goodbye to someone we may not see for a while, we say a word of halakha to that person. We'll give him a halakha to walk away with. Now, let's question that. Why would you give a person a halakha? Why wouldn't you just give him a wish for good health and prosperity and safety and so on? And our rabbis say that we say goodbye to a person with a piece of halakha because halakha is movement. Jewish law is not stagnant. It's dynamic. And when I part with someone with an expression of Jewish law, I'm keeping the dialogue open between us, the vibrancy, the questions, the sharing of an idea. I'm not looking to simply say, have a great day with all my love and my best wishes. That's nice. But what I really want to say is, our conversation never ends. The sharing that we have for each other doesn't end. The dynamic openness of our relationship should only be elevated over time. And how do you do that? With what our rabbis brilliantly called halakha. Jewish law could have been called anything, but it's called halakha, movement, process, steps forward, to shout the great possibility of questioning constantly. So I want to remind myself and all of us to never stop questioning and being reminded that to question doesn't mean that what I have isn't beautiful and wonderful and full of love and good things. It is. So what? Life is great. Things are just getting started. and the ability to question each area and to attempt to identify new horizons of growth is infinite and unlimited. I want to thank you all very much for joining. And if anybody has any thoughts or questions, we're going to try and do that real quick.
Yeah.
Gaily, the baby has a question, honey?
Yeah, say it again. I don't know if people heard you.
Marge is there.
All right. Thank you all. Great to see
Vicky.
everybody. Yeah.
Vicky, hi, I have a question. It's Esther. How are you?
Hi, Esther.
Hi. So my question is, like, everything that you're saying, it's amazing. And where do we stand? Maybe you spoke about this, I joined 15 minutes late, but where do we stand in terms of the Geulah and us going home? Shabbat's going to Israel.
Listen, I don't want to answer that question in a quick answer, but I will tell you that I believe very strongly that we don't live in a world of chaos. We live in a world that's under Kadosh Baruch Hu's direction. You guys can mute yourselves, whoever has background noise. We live in a world that is directed by Kadosh Baruch Hu. All of that direction is taking us to a very definitive place. I believe that Corona, everything else that goes on, is a major interjection.
I put a dot in my water.
In world events by Kadosh Baruch Hu.
It smells like it's burning.
All of this is leading to
Everybody mute.
it's all ultimately leading us back home. And I believe that the process is quickening and becoming more overt. That's my
Right.
process.
Right. Okay. Thank you so much. Shabbat shalom. So good to see
Thank you,
you.
everybody.
Thank you. Shabbat
Hi,
shalom.
thank you.
Shalom.